Welcome, friends and scoundrels, to Horror in the Hills. I'm Brand,
Sarah, Robbie.
and this is movies with my monsters, where my monsters and I watch movies together, particularly scary movies. So, what did we watch this time?
Freaks.
Freaks from 1932. Yeah, I'll do it all later. I don't care. So, what'd you think?
It was boring.
It was boring?
It was interesting, but certainly not scary.
So, why do you think it was boring, Robbie?
Because it wasn't scary.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Not scary?
No.
No. Mind you, again, this movie's from 1932. It's 11 years shy of being 100 years old. So, at the time, though, this movie was actually quite scary. What do you think the scariest part was for people?
The end when there was a half chicken, half person. I'm not sure.
It was actually, well, I don't know if it's actually, but there is a scene from this movie that's considered one of the 100 scariest ever scenes. And it's the Gooble Gobble scene after they get married.
Why is that considered scary?
I don't know offhand. I haven't watched it. But other people talking about this movie have mentioned that on AMC's 100 Scariest Moments in History, this is on that list. I don't remember where it's at. It's been a while. But for people at the time, where cinema was only 10, 20 years old at the time, so barely, so around your guys' age, right?
Yeah.
And things like this would have been scary. I think, for me personally, if there's any part that's scary, it's near the end when they confront Cleopatra, finally. Just because of the imagery. Because you have all the people creeping around underneath the carriages and stuff. The way the shadows are on them and the way they're moving. That's the part that I think could be the most scary in this movie. And then the chicken at the end, too. That part's pretty creepy.
I wonder how she got like that.
And that's part of what makes it scary. What did they do to make her like that? What could they have done to make her like that? Right?
Yeah.
So, I remember, like, a lot of horror stories at the time, even books and stuff, because you had Dracula was already in existence as a story at this point. It already had a movie, too. The Phantom of the Opera, Frankenstein, what else? I don't know, there's a lot.
Isn't there an old Mummies movie?
Yeah, but I don't remember when it came out. I don't remember if it was pre-Hays Code or post-Hays Code. But horror did exist already. You had werewolf stories, and you had Dracula as a story, and Mary Shelley had written Frankenstein, and there were other vampire legends and stuff that already existed. So horror's been a part of our existence for as long as we know as humans. There's always been some kind of scary story. Usually they're a tale to keep children inside at night, keep people from running around and misbehaving in the night. That's usually like vampires and werewolves. That's why they stalk at night. Zombies were kind of a thing. But as far as cinema goes and actually seeing it, this stuff was relatively new. But it's always been around. Right?
Yeah.
What are some of your other thoughts?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
How about the way the freaks are treated? Do you think the movie's trying to say something about that?
Yeah.
What do you think it's trying to say?
Don't know how to word it.
Do you have any ideas, Robbie?
No.
Well, start from the base. How are the people in the movie treated?
Not very well.
Not very well. Why?
Because they look different.
Most of them, yeah. Most of them, it's just a matter of looking a little bit different, right? Some of them have some pretty big differences and stuff, right?
Yeah.
But, so, starting at that foundation, what do you think the movie's trying to say? Because who treats them like that?
The people who, who look normal.
Do all of them, though?
No.
So, it's mostly just the bad guys, right?
Yeah.
So, that's something that's been around a long time, too, right?
Yeah.
Is that bad guys will often treat other people who can be considered others, badly. So I think this movie is trying to make a point that, just because they're different or they look different doesn't mean that they're not human, right? Doesn't mean that they shouldn't be treated right. Because they have feelings, and we tend to want to lash out when our feelings are hurt, don't we?
Yeah.
And that can lead to bad things, worse things even, sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thing that I think is interesting is, especially at this time, circus people were considered amongst the lowest people. Just circus people in general. Didn't matter. It doesn't, what part of the circus they were in. But people always find somebody below them to treat worse, or to treat as below them. It's a terrible thing, yes, and we need to work to not be that way, right?
Yeah.
But it is part of being human for whatever reason. And this goes into all kinds of different things. Racism and, sexism is a big part of this movie. The way they talk about the women. Did you notice that?
No.
Either of you? Oh, you women always doing this. I won't be told what to do by a woman. Those kinds of comments.
Yeah.
But, we oftentimes will take much easier to hating somebody than we will trying to find reasons to like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because a lot of times that's a much easier path to take than not hating somebody. We see that a lot going on in the world today still, don't we?
Yeah.
Almost 100 years later, and people are still treating each other very badly, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of it's for the same reasons. Some of it's because people look different. Sometimes it's because people think differently. Sometimes it is a matter of what your gender is. But we should work to find not necessarily reasons to like people, but we should not be trying to find ways to hate people. Right?
Yeah.
It's okay to not get along with people. And when you just can't get along with somebody, that doesn't mean you should hate them. It means you should just, maybe the best thing is to avoid them. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes there's no other option. Sometimes you can still get along. There's a quote that I like, and it's been attributed to a few different people, that just because I don't want you at my table doesn't mean I don't want you to eat. Just not room at my table for you. There's a table over there that you can eat at. I very much paraphrased that and butchered it. I'm sorry. But you get the general idea, right?
Yeah.
What else do you think about this movie?
I'm not really sure.
No? I like this movie. I think it's entertaining. By no means is it as extravagant as what we're used to today, is it? Doesn't mean that it can't still be good. And that's why I want you guys to watch this stuff, so that way you'll have an appreciation for it. But without movies like this, we wouldn't have a lot of the movies that we have today. So another thing that's really important about this movie, or something that's really important about this movie, is that this is kind of like Gremlins or Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Do you remember what I told you guys about those two movies?
No.
After we watched Gremlins for Christmas?
No.
Do you remember?
No.
Talked about how Gremlins and Temple of Doom encouraged the MPAA to create the PG-13 rating. Do you remember that?
No. Yeah. No.
Yeah. No? Yes or no?
No.
I did talk about that, didn't I, Mommy?
Maybe.
Maybe it was just with you. But those movies were influential in creating the PG-13 rating. So you know the rating system, right?
No.
No? God, I'm failing you guys. So the MPAA is in charge of creating ratings for movies, right?
Yeah.
You got G, PG, PG-13, R, and more, right?
Yeah.
And that's to help people determine whether or not it's fitting for them, and more specifically, fitting for children to go see. So G is your typical Disney type movie where there's hardly anything terrible in it. Especially the newer ones where people aren't drinking, they usually don't smoke, there's no cursing in it, things like that, right?
Yeah.
Your older Disney movies still have that stuff, right?
Yeah.
If you think about them. PG's more along the lines of like Shrek or the second Gremlins movie, where it's still fairly kid friendly, but parents should be around to help guide things. Parental Guidance. 13 is suggested for children 13 and above, and R is restricted, so 17 or up. So before that, there's the Hays Code. And this movie encouraged them to create the Hays Code, which it wasn't an actual law, but it was a means of determining what was fitting to be in a movie or not.
Yeah.
And it's not determined by the government. Neither is the MPAA. They're run by Hollywood. And that's something that, since I've learned, I've loosened up my criticism of the MPAA a little bit. Because if they start slacking and they don't do a good job, then the government will try to step in and do those things. And I don't want that, personally. One, because it's a form of censorship, right?
Yeah.
And we don't... That's how you end up with more devious forms of controlling things. That's a conversation for another time. Or it can lead there. There are other countries where their governments are in control of it, and they do well enough, and they rate things differently than we do, even on an individual basis. Sometimes for another country, things will be they'll restrict it more than we might, or we might have more restrictions than another country, or restrictive consideration than another country might. So, I don't know. Just some things to talk about. Since you guys are being boring.
I think Invisible Man was more entertaining because it had some funny aspects to it, humorous aspects to it.
There were plenty of funny moments. Maybe you just weren't into it because you were just already out of the movie, which is entirely possible. If you don't get invested in something right away, you don't pay as much attention to things as they're happening. Also, some of the jokes might have gone over your head. In general, do you think it was a good story?
Yeah. Yeah.
In what ways?
It felt very goodly paced and it had a really good theme.
What theme?
That just because someone is different in any way doesn't mean you should be hateful toward them.
Okay. Is that a story plot that you've seen before used?
I feel like I should have, but I can't.
Do you know what the general plot was?
No.
Or became? So, that's one of the things with older movies is they're still trying to figure out how to tell stories in cinema, right? So the first little while is just showing their daily lives, right?
Yeah.
There's not bad character growth and development, but the actual story plot doesn't kick in until Cleopatra figures out that Hans is rich, right?
Mm-hmm.
So from that point on, what is the plot?
Cleopatra trying to kill him to get his money.
So she marries him to inherit his money, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen that before?
I feel like I have, but I can't remember where.
Huh? Do you remember Aristocats?
A movie?
Yes. Disney movie with cats that are rich.
Yeah.
And the butler's wants to get rid of the cats, that way he can get the money. It's been a while since we watched that movie. I feel like one of the Shreks kind of plays with that very basic premise a little bit, doesn't it? Yeah, the second one kind of plays with it a little bit. Trying to get rid of Shreks, that way Charming can take his place. It's in the same realm. I was just trying to get you to think about, that you might see things reoccur in other movies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. Because you will. I mean, we watched one earlier today that's going up before this, Host.
Yeah.
And that fairly similar to Paranormal Activity.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a bunch of other movies where they do a seance or something, and a spirit comes and bothers them. Usually it's a demonic presence because it's an easy fallback. Demons are supposed to be bad, or are considered bad. What about the atmosphere? Do you think there's some atmosphere in this movie?
Like toward being scary, or?
Generally, that's what we're talking about. This is a horror-related podcast.
I didn't really catch up on anything scary.
We talked about it earlier already a little bit, right? Right?
Yeah.
With near the end, when they confront Cleopatra and Hercules is going to kill Venus and everything, what's happening at that time?
They're creeping up on them.
Well, let's start from the beginning of that moment. Is it a nice calm day or?
No. It's stormy.
Stormy. So stormy is a common setting for making things uncomfortable. It's also, is it daytime or?
Night.
It's nighttime. So darkness is often a little bit claustrophobic. Creates a sense of claustrophobia. See here, and then you have the shadowing, the lighting, as everybody's crawling around under, right?
Yeah.
So the moments that are meant to be scary are kind of scary, right?
Little bit.
So even with the chicken lady, it's brightly lit and everything, but it's done that way so we can see her. Also, kind of a bookend. It starts with him telling the beginning, or starts with a gentleman telling that story, or beginning to tell that story, and then ends in the reveal. So that's kind of in the same area as atmosphere. It's a sudden shock, but because of lack of everything, it gets there. I don't know. I just don't know.
That's a very common thing.
What's that?
Where a guy starts telling a story at the beginning and then it goes into it like it's actually happening, and then ends off with him elaborating or something.
Or concluding, or finishing up the point of this is where the story was leading to. Yeah. I've got this thing that I'm going to show you, but I have to tell you the story first, right?
Yeah. Like in Phantom of the Opera.
Mm-hmm. Sure, it's been a while since I've watched that. And I don't like the newer renditions. I'm trying to find the scary ones. Do you have any favorite parts in this?
No, not really. No.
I like the Gooble Gobble scene because I think it's fun and entertaining. It's, I mean, the movie's not terribly bleak or anything. It's pretty lighthearted all the way through, up until the very end. But it brings a sense of camaraderie and shows that even though these people are treated bad and they see kind of what's going on with Cleopatra, they're still willing to make her part of their clan. They're extending a hand, if you will.
Okay.
Least favorite part?
I'm not sure I have a least favorite part either. I wasn't really engaged with this movie.
That shows. Oh, let's see here. I don't really have a least favorite part. Like I said, I enjoy this movie quite a bit. It's not something I necessarily go out of my way to watch a lot, but I could put it on in the background and enjoy it, know what's going on, or watch it every now and again. So yeah, that's our episode on Freaks. Like, comment, subscribe, no matter what you're doing or where you're listening to this from. Go out and listen to or watch this movie and let us know what you think about it. Like I said, as far as cinema history goes, this movie is very important, and just watch it anyways. All right, I'm done trying to force stuff. Bye.